Everybody likes trees, and trees are really helpful in your yard or in parks or places where we need shade or fruit or whatever. But there are trees that are better than others. There are trees that are in the wrong place. And when you have a situation where you have trees that you don't want, you have to know what to do about it. One of the places that we don't want trees around here is in our prairies. We have a lot of grassland wildlife and grassland plants that don't do well in the shade or don't do well around shelters like trees or places where predators can sit. And so we try to keep our prairies as open as we possibly can. And sometimes that means that we have to kill trees when they're just getting started, and sometimes we end up in situations where we have to kill trees when they're bigger. But we really want to talk today about how to handle situations where you have small trees in places where you don't want them. You know, we deal with both native and non-native trees that can be problems in prairies and other places. Some of the bigger problems we have are with Siberian elms or eastern red cedar. Siberian elms are non-native, cedars are native. But things like smooth sumac or roughleaf dogwood are native trees or native shrubs that can be problematic if they get too abundant, especially in prairies. There's a lot of different ways to get rid of small trees. We're going to talk about some of the different ones today. Some of those, if they're small enough, you can just pull them out of the ground by the roots and you're done. But if you can't get the entire root, most of these trees, especially the deciduous ones, will resprout and they'll cause you problems for a long time if you don't know what you're doing.
For different trees, it requires a different technique. For things like eastern red cedar, we can use prescribed fire to control it. For Siberian elms that are large, we can use a basal bark or cutting it, whereas small saplings that are like within 8 to 10 feet or lower that we can comfortably foliar spray, we're going to go with a foliar spraying option. So with using an herbicide product to kill a tree, you're essentially going for different routes to get that herbicide into the tree. Through a foliar application, you're applying it to the leaves and having the herbicide be absorbed through the leaves and into either the growing points or where it's translocated throughout the plant. For a cut stump situation where you're cutting off the majority of the tree and leaving the stump, there we're going to apply a chemical to that freshly cut stump base or to the outside of that stump, depending on the chemical. In basal bark, we're using an oil-based carrier to go through the bark into the fluid transfer channels of the tree. And that's going to translocate that herbicide to the growing points of that tree and ultimately cause death.
So there's a lot of options for dealing with small trees. If you can pull them out of the ground and just be done with them, that's the easiest, but a lot of times it's not that simple. So there are different herbicides you can use, different techniques you can use. Go to places like University Extension websites or other sources and really do some reading on each of these techniques, because the label instructions are going to be different for each herbicide type, and we can't cover everything here. But don't be afraid to be aggressive with small trees. Get them while they're small, because when they get bigger, they're harder to deal with.